Church. My name is Evan. I'm the treasurer at the church. For those of you who don't know, my wife Anna is pregnant. She's due June 3rd with our first child, a boy. Everything is going great there. She's healthy. All good news there. Matt has asked me to get into Psalm 20 and Proverbs 26 with you. And so we'll start in Psalm 20. And for those of you who haven't read it, I would encourage you to do that now. So Psalm 20 is a Psalm of David. It was a prayer that he wrote for the people to pray for the king. And so David wrote it. It's a prayer, and he wrote it for the people to pray for the king, and specifically during battles or before battles. We see in verse 9, it says, "O Lord, save the king." So that's where you can tell it's for the king. One place you can. And then verses 1 through 4, you see the use of the word you, the singular pronoun. It says, "May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble," in verse 1. So the you there is David. So this is for the people to pray. And the verses I want to take a close look at are 7 and 8. So there it says, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright." So what David is saying is he's admonishing the Israelites to trust in the name of the Lord our God. And it says in verse 6, whose saving might is his right hand. So trust in the might of his right hand. So God is a mighty God and mighty to save. And so they're not to trust in the chariots and horses. And these are the things that the other nations trust in. So the other nations have chariots and horses, and presumably the Israelites would have chariots and horses as well. And so God wasn't opposed to their using them, but he was opposed to them trusting in them as opposed to trusting in him. So the question for us is, who do we trust? Do we trust ourselves and our abilities and our resources? Do we trust in our own ability to provide for ourselves, to feed ourselves and feed our families? Or do we trust in God, who made those resources and gave those to us? So God wants us to use our resources the best we can and to work hard, but he wants us to trust him. And we can see that in 1 Corinthians 15:10, where it says, "I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me." And that's what Paul said there. So Paul worked extremely hard, but knew that it was God working through him and not his own strength. And we should be the same way. And as God gives us victories, like in verse 5, we should shout for joy over his salvation and his victory in our spiritual battles. And as we get those victories, we should praise King Jesus and desire his glory above our own and his glory alone. Okay, so now turning to Proverbs 26. So this is a proverb that's about a lot of different things. So it's about the nature of a fool, about wise and foolish speech, about laziness. You see the laziness talked about in verses 13 through 16. About a sluggard. And so the sluggard is, there's comical examples given about a sluggard, and so I would encourage you to take a look at those. But I'm going to focus on verses 4 and 5. So verses 4 and 5 are apparently, they appear to be contradictory. So they're, what I believe is this is a critical couple verses to help understand the Proverbs as a whole. So let's read those. It says, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes." Okay, so why does the writer of the Proverbs include these two verses back to back? I would argue that it's to say that the Proverbs must be applied wisely. They're going to vary by situation. In some situations, you should hold your tongue, and in other situations, you should speak up. So that's a critical principle, I believe, here of the Proverbs. That you need wisdom to use them wisely. The Proverbs themselves are wisdom, but in the hands of a fool, they will be either used foolishly or they'll be useless. In verse 7, it says, "Like a lame man's legs, which hang useless, is a proverb in the mouth of fools." So you need to be wise to use the Proverbs wisely. And we see that in Proverbs 1:3. Proverbs 1:5 actually says, "Let the wise hear." So the audience for the Proverbs are the wise. So it's used to make people more wise, but the audience themselves are also already wise. So how does that work? How do we get wisdom? So one thing to do practically is to read the Proverbs. So that sounds kind of backwards, but you should not. The key there is you shouldn't just read the Proverbs. You should read the Proverbs and ask God for wisdom and meditate on His Word, and ultimately know that it's God who gives wisdom freely from above. James 3:17 says that wisdom comes from above. So it's not just scattered across everywhere. God gives it, and God gives it to everyone who believes in Him. So when you're saved, you do receive wisdom. Not wisdom like the world. You're not all of a sudden a philosopher, but you do receive wisdom, and wisdom allows us to follow God's law and to not sin. So Jesus died to make us wise. He died to make you wise. In your sin and your foolishness, and my sin and my foolishness, put Jesus on the cross. And so he died to save us from that. He wants us to be more wise so that we can be more useful for Him, so that we can help others better, and we can love others better, and we can love Him better. Not because He needs us, but because He loves us, and it's for our joy and His glory. And I'm thankful that our church has many, many examples of people who have grown in wisdom. I can be discouraging to see where am I growing. I feel like not wise as I should be. And so it's encouraging to see that the older folks in our church, a lot of them are extremely wise. And so we see in the Proverbs this idea that wisdom, it takes time and it's a process. And so that's encouraging for me. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." So it's not just the end. It's not. It says there is a beginning. So it starts there and continues. Proverbs 4:18 says, "The path of righteousness is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day." So again, you see that concept of becoming more like Him and a process. So don't lose heart. God's working. That's my word there. My application question in closing is: how could you and I be more helpful to others if we were more wise? So in what ways could God use the wisdom He gives you for others? And what are you doing now that you'd be better at if you're more wise and more helpful to others? So let's continue to be more wise and through asking God for wisdom, through seeking Him in His Word, and till we meet again. I miss you all and look forward to that day when we can see each other again. All right.